Good morning. I want to tell you a story about the US debt crises. And there are, oops, they already moved it. There are three misconceptions. One, that government debt doesn't matter. Two, that deficits create prosperity. And three, that if we were to have a debt crisis, we could see it coming from a mile away, and then we could just address it when it happened. Just like a single spark can ignite a forest fire, debt crises happen suddenly and unexpectedly when investors lose confidence in a government's ability or willingness to service its debt without inflating away its value. A debt crisis is not something we can avoid unless we take active steps to avoid it. But this is another misconception about the US debt crisis, is that if we were to be in a debt crisis, that we would know it, that we would feel it. We could see it all around us. It would feel like the Great Recession, just much, much worse. That is one possible outcome of a US debt crisis, but it's not the only one. And I would argue that we are in a fiscal crisis already today. It's just a silent crisis. This graphic shows you the projection of debt growth over the next 30 years from the Congressional Budget Office. And what I want to draw your attention to is that our debt, at the black bar you see there, is already at about 100% of our economy. And we are nearing the highest recorded level of debt in US history, which was right after World War II. And I say that we're already in a fiscal crisis because 9 out of 10 academic studies that have looked at the correlation between debt and economic growth have found that when industrialized countries reach debt levels of 80% of GDP and higher, it depresses economic growth significantly. By significantly, I mean that over the next 30 years, American workers will lose out on $13,000 in income per person because our debt is so high. What this chart also shows you is that as our debt is projected to double over the next 30 years, we will accumulate more than 110 trillion in additional deficits, which is like saying that the federal government will borrow 4 times the amount it has borrowed over its entire history in just the next 30 years. And the real kicker is that even if Congress crossed its arms today and didn't make any more spending increases, did not increase the deficit by an additional cent, we are already heading towards this fiscal crisis because the programs that are driving us into debt are Medicare and Social Security. When the Treasury put out its financial report of the United States government, they identified that of the 80 trillion in long-term unfunded obligations over the next 75 years, 95% can be directly attributed to Medicare and Social Security. And politicians don't like to reform these old age benefit programs. And this is the part of my talk where I'm supposed to say, but don't worry, I also have good news. Well, we're not quite there yet. One of the issues we face is the American people and politicians suffer from what Jim Buchanan called fiscal illusion. Americans believe that their Medicare and Social Security benefits are earned benefits, that these are insurance programs for which they paid a premium. Actually, they are transfer programs redistributing income from working American families toward, on average, higher net worth, wealthier, retired Americans. It's also delusional to argue that we can just tax the rich. When Brian Riedel ran the math and said, what if we squeezed every single penny out of the wealthiest Americans, by how much could we raise revenue? He identified it, we might get another 2 percentage points of GDP. That might get us to 20% of GDP in revenues, but our spending over the next 30 years will be at 30% of GDP. So that's not going to fix the problem either. And because so much of our government spending is financed through borrowing, Americans do not consider the trade-off of the government they suffer under. So we get much larger government than we would if we actually said every time we increase spending, Americans' tax dollars would go up as well. This is not part of what happens. However, I would like to recall something that Milton Friedman said, is the way to make changes is that you have to make it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. And that's where I have good news. There have been a lot of failed commissions in the United States, attempts that Congress has tried in order to address this problem. But there's also been one commission that has worked, and that was the BRAC Commission, the Base Realignment and Closure Commission, with the goal of closing obsolete military bases after the Cold War. This was a very intractable political problem where even though everyone knew that the bases were obsolete and getting too expensive, whenever you suggested to close a base in a particular congressman's district, he would say, oh, no, 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 not in my district. Our base is not obsolete. And to overcome this problem, Congress established an independent commission made up of experts and tasked it with identifying these bases for closures. The commission succeeded. Another key element of the commission was not only was it not made up of members of Congress who would have had a difficult time picking commissions for closure, but it also allowed Congress not to have to take an affirmative vote on the final list of closures. And that was key, because that is how other commissions like Simpson-Bowles have failed. So in order for Congress to establish a fiscal commission with real authority, they should model it after the Base Realignment and Closure Commission, which means they should staff the commission with independent experts. I volunteer as a tribute. And then they should avoid Congress having to take an affirmative vote on the commission proposal. Because what we fundamentally face is a political problem. Politicians are unwilling and unable to stick their necks out and take the fall for entitlement programs that were established decades ago, and they are now getting stuck with the problem. And the only way to get around I think, is to get this out of politics, which is why I am in favor of a BRAC-like fiscal commission. This isn't just about dollars and cents or about economic growth, although these are all important issues. But addressing our US debt crisis is also a question of generational justice. And I have good news for you here, too. There is a way where we can protect seniors from poverty and uphold that promise without crushing younger generations with unsustainable burdens of debt and economy-crushing tax hikes. But in order to do that, we need to start now. Congress should establish a fiscal commission with real authority and task it with stabilizing the debt over the next 10 years, and also task it with making the Medicare and Social Security sustainable over the long run. And if we can do that, we can preserve prosperity in America, not just for this generation, but for many generations to come. Thank you.